I want to welcome all of you here today. The reason we are here is because vulnerable adults are the perfect victims hiding in plain sight, and we need the public to be aware of how they can help us combat the abuse that many of these vulnerable adults experience. Saturday, June 15th, marked World Elder Abuse Day. This recognition by the United Nations began in 2011. The intent was to bring about awareness of the financial, physical, and sexual abuse happening to vulnerable adults around the world. This abuse happens regardless of race, gender, or socioeconomic situation. Today, we stand here to acknowledge the abuse and exploitation of vulnerable adults happening here in South Carolina, and to give you the information that you need in order to help us combat this abuse. This office has historically investigated and prosecuted these crimes against vulnerable adults. However, today we are doubling our efforts to make the public aware of this resource. By raising awareness, we hope to increase the chances that more tips of abuse will be reported. The South Carolina Attorney General's Vulnerable Adults and Medicaid Provider Fraud Unit is our first line of defense in these efforts. Whether a vulnerable adult is in a facility or in their own home, the abuse, neglect, and exploitation they experience is often committed by those who should be caring for them the most. South Carolina's older citizens and those with intellectual disabilities generally make up the vulnerable adult population. In working with law enforcement throughout South Carolina, my office has found that our partnership is uncovering heinous cases of neglect, abuse, and exploitation. This beneficial working relationship between the trained investigators in our office who work with local law enforcement to address crimes previously underreported or misunderstood allows us to fully understand the signs and recognize the criminal acts taking place. We have seen the following types of abuse occur. Caregivers causing physical injuries to victims in nursing homes and assisted living facilities. Nurses stealing prescription drugs and replacing them with over-the-counter medication. Adult children squandering their parents' entire life savings while leaving nothing to pay for their nursing care needs. And administrators who locked residents in their rooms with no air conditioning, prescriptions, food, or water. Oftentimes, law enforcement receives reports from the community, and it is clear that something is wrong, but the next steps can often be unclear. This is why my office is here to assist. Now, I asked my staff earlier this morning to just take a look back at the last 5 years to give you an idea of how many cases we're receiving from the community. And over the last 5 years, we've received an average of 72 criminal referrals every year, and we've opened up from those 72 referrals averaged a year about 50 cases per year over the last 5 years. So we're receiving an average of 72 cases a year, and we're opening an average of 50 cases per year. That's significant, but we think that there's a lot more abuse happening out there, and we want to shed more light on it. One of our partnerships is with the Orangeburg Department of Public Safety, and I would like to invite my friend, Chief Charles Austin, to say a few words. Chief, thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General Wilson, and I also want to thank John Frampton and Jennifer Long for the very able assistance that your team provided us recently as we undertook a couple of cases that involved exploitation of vulnerable adults and people with disabilities. We realized that it is a significant problem, and oftentimes local agencies exhaust their resources and cases may go uninvestigated or put on the back burner while we try to figure out what the next step is. But having this partnership with your staff assures us that we have a partner that we can reach out to and we can continue these cases. It is a major, major problem. On yesterday, I was watching a movie on Netflix entitled Tell Them You Love Me. And it involved a young man who had cerebral palsy. I have a son who has cerebral palsy, but this young man was nonverbal. And the provider that was entrusted to help him with facilitated communication was convicted of sexually assaulting and abusing this young man. which brought home a reality that it's happening, it's out there. Our responsibility is to identify those issues, those cases, seek the help we need to investigate them and prosecute the persons who are responsible. So again, I want to thank you so much for bringing your resources to the table because, quite frankly, as a local agency, we're limited in many instances, and we need that assistance. So thank you very much, and we look forward to working with Team AG.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you. And it's the partnerships with folks like Chief Austin and his department that make this unit such a success, and we really appreciate you being here today to help us promote our efforts in combating elder abuse, vulnerable adult abuse. So thank you, Chief, for that. Orangeburg is just one example of law enforcement groups we have worked with around our state. 2 years ago, my office began an outreach and training program encouraging law enforcement to call us with questions or for assistance. Since that time, we have seen a 30% increase in the number of referrals of vulnerable adult cases and exploitation cases. That's incredible. We are not only taking referrals, but providing training to law enforcement and assisting agencies like the one you just heard from with Charles Austin, who are working on these types of cases. We realized through our outreach that most people had no idea this specialized unit existed in the Attorney General's office, which is the reason we're rebranding it to add vulnerable adults to the title, because it is such an important function of what we do here in the Attorney General's office, and the public needs to understand that this resource is out there to protect vulnerable adults. The men and women standing up here with me today are wanting you to know we are ready and willing to help and assist. Now, standing with me today are members of the Vulnerable Adults and Medicaid Provider Fraud Unit. They are a task force-styled unit prepared to work a case from beginning to end and assist anywhere in between. Now, we have about 11 investigators, 3 auditors, and 5 prosecutors and 2 administrative assistants, and many of these folks have specialized training on our staff who exclusively work on these types of cases. For example, just the pedigree of the people we have investigator Jennifer Long, who is also, she's an investigator, a credentialed law enforcement officer, but also a registered nurse. We have investigator Heather Diebold, who is a licensed pharmacist, also a credentialed law enforcement officer. We have Lisa Collins, Jessica Robinson, and Sam Ross, who are all experienced auditors trained to analyze and review financial records. Our team is led by Director Stephanie Opit, who is my right arm, and she's actually my left arm today, but she literally is running this unit and doing a fantastic job, and I'm so proud of where you've taken this unit over the last several years, Stephanie. Well, we also have Deputy Director Brandon Steen, along with prosecutors Ken Moore, Emily Klebar, and Vanessa Horsley, who work with investigators to keep building the strongest cases for the court. Our investigative team is led by Chief Investigator John Frampton. His team includes Assistant Chief Investigator Jamie Seals, Miles Raw, Tim Abbott, Marty Longshore, Susan Alderman, Ronnie Arnold, Jake Hendricks, and Kat Robinson. Now, we also have 2 administrative assistants or legal assistants, and when you call the hotline or call our number, chances are you're going to be reaching them first before you go anywhere else within the unit. And we also have Lee Ball and Demi Keith, who are our administrative staff. And again, the administrative staff, they're really what kind of propels us forward. So we appreciate them for being here as well. These individuals that I just named are familiar with the schemes and cover-ups as well as the tools available to dig into reported allegations against those who are preying on our vulnerable adults. If you see something or hear something that doesn't seem right, please call our hotline. That number is 1-888-662-4328. And if you like a little mnemonic, it's 1-888-NO-CHEAT. You remember that, 1-888-NO-CHEAT. The abusers rely on the public not knowing what is going on or not knowing who to tell if they suspect something is going on. We aim for our vulnerable adults to be treated with the dignity and the safety that they deserve. For this to happen, we need an informed public to partner with us to achieve this goal. We look forward to receiving reports from any concerned citizens out there around our state. We also look forward to working with any law enforcement who wants to team up or refer cases to our office. it's to, as I said earlier, it's to double our efforts to promote what we're doing, because when we reached out to law enforcement with our outreach efforts and started promoting this with training and just raising awareness, the number of referrals from our law enforcement friends increased drastically by 30%. We hope that by rebranding, because this used to be called the Medicaid Provider Fraud Unit, now it's the Vulnerable Adult and Medicaid Provider Fraud Unit. So we want, and again, vulnerable adults are such a major part of what we do, and it is a specialized kind of boutique area of criminal practice that not a lot of law enforcement agencies are familiar with. Dealing with vulnerable adults, as you just heard, requires a lot of specialized training. We have special auditors, specially trained auditors, specially trained pharmacists, specially trained nurses. The investigative team is very dialed into this type of crime and what it means. And so we have always done this, but because we've been met with some success in our outreach efforts with law enforcement, our team believed that it would be important for us to rebrand the unit by putting vulnerable adults at the front of the title and then going out to the public and letting folks know that we have this unit out there as a resource, not only to our law enforcement friends, but also to the general public. And again, I have a grandmother who's nearly 99 years old, and she's in a facility, and she's receiving great care, and I'm incredibly grateful for the people providing her care. But this is why this is special to me, because I see how important it is when you entrust a facility or a home care nursing group to take care of your loved one, and then they don't get the care that they deserve. And also, there are also family members out there who are not as honorable in their intentions with their loved ones, and we want to make sure that we protect those vulnerable adults. Yes, sir.
What do you think prevents more people from coming forward when they see something like this happening?
Stephanie could probably unpack that a little bit, but I'll tell you what I think. I think a lot of times people don't know what they know until they know it, if that makes any sense. In other words, they see something that doesn't seem right, but they don't really know how to. It's kind of the same problem we have with human trafficking, right? You see the abuse happening, but it doesn't appear to be abuse. It could be very subtle, and then when you do see it, who do you call? Who do you go to report this? And oftentimes, you might be a little nervous to report on a facility that's got custody of your loved one. These could all be factors that contribute to it. Stephanie, I'm happy to let you answer that.
You answered it very well. I would say that some of these types of crimes people don't acknowledge as being crimes. For example, financial exploitation. Sometimes people say, this is my inheritance, so I'm going to go ahead and spend it now, when in fact those funds should be put towards the care of that elderly parent. And then other times, these are difficult cases. So when you've got older citizens, the way that they manifest physical injury is more difficult, or is different than it is for a younger person. So sometimes you might see a bed sore and think, oh, this is terrible, what has happened? But in fact, that's just a condition of aging. So we have a specialized team who's really good at going in and differentiating between what's part of aging and what is actual abuse.
So a lot of times the crimes, whether it's injury to a senior citizen or a vulnerable adult, and it doesn't have to be a senior citizen, let me make that abundantly clear. It can be an intellectually disabled adult. But you see, especially with senior citizens, you see an injury, or like she said, oftentimes you have family managing the finances and you're spending the money in a way that may not look good but is perfectly fine, or a way that looks fine but is not really good. And it requires people to go in there and kind of sift through all that because it is in a gray area. So that's what makes it difficult.
Regarding gray areas, what about those seniors who require maybe daycare while family members, et cetera, go to work, and you can't necessarily, they're not in the Medicaid state yet, and so that financial strain, so they entrust them with maybe somebody that isn't that trustable because they can't afford any medical care, and it's not covered by.
So are you talking about someone who's receiving care, in-home care, but
Yes,
but not from a Medicaid facility? Well, again, we are limited in, we can investigate these types of cases in facilities that receive Medicaid or don't receive Medicaid, but when you get to a home care facility that doesn't have that Medicaid hook, that might have to be referred to local law enforcement. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's correct. And we always, when we get those cases, we do our best to make sure we point someone in the right direction and help facilitate that referral.
So again, that's why the partnership that we talked about earlier with Chief Austin and other law enforcement officials is so important. Sometimes there may be something on the federal side that prohibits us from going into because it doesn't fall under the definition of the care facility and that there's no Medicaid hook. Obviously, if there is Medicaid, we can still investigate the in-home stuff, but if it falls through that gap, we work with local law enforcement and they take the lead. We can provide general guidance, but we're prohibited under federal law from being the lead prosecutor on that. But that's why it's a team effort, because we have other law enforcement agencies that can do that.
Not to get too much into the nitty-gritty details.
But you're going to anyway, right?
I will. And not to put the cart before the horse, but the state budget's still being negotiated right now. But I see that y'all, or at least this unit, depends on about a quarter of its funding from the state. At this point, is it in line to receive its full allocation?
Yes, yes. The state. So, just to explain, you were very good to point that out. So for every dollar that it costs to run this unit, 75 cents comes from the federal government and 25 cents comes from the state appropriation. And there's been a great partnership that our state appropriators and the legislative branch of government understand that they're getting their return on investment is threefold. They get 3 times what they put in. So 75-25 is a great split, and the federal money is there. The state money has never been for wanting. So we have no problems with the state appropriation. We're fully staffed and fully funded, and obviously we have a lot of other areas in the office that probably aren't doing as well. But again, the quality of the men and women standing up here is unsurpassed, and I am incredibly proud of what they do with what they've been given.
Since the 3/4 of that is coming from the feds, and it sounds like it's coming through a grant, is that something that will be renewed year
Yes.
after year? Okay.
It has been. As long as I've been Attorney General, as Stephanie said, going back to the mid-'90s. This unit's been in play. And again, we have always been prosecuting vulnerable adult cases, but the general public, and even law enforcement up until recently, didn't really know that this resource existed. We have focused a lot over the last several years on what we're doing with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and going after predators who prey on our children. We've been talking about our Human Trafficking Task Force and the local, state, and federal partnerships we have in going after those who, basically trade in modern-day slavery, with young people or old people alike. We promoted human trafficking in ICAC. We've promoted Sexually Violent Predator Unit that goes out there to keep sexually violent predators off the streets by getting them committed to mental health facilities. We've talked about other units, and this is one of those units that just has not received the attention it deserves because it's such an important thing. The general public needs to know that this unit exists. Law enforcement is now realizing it and is starting to use it more and more, and we hope that the general public will see that if you have someone who's being a vulnerable adult, who's not being taken care of properly, or who's being abused in some form or fashion, that you will at least call the number. And again, our people can assess the case, determine if it's within our jurisdiction. They can assess it, determine if there really is an abuse occurring, and then we can take it from there. But I tell people, when in doubt, err on the side of reporting something. Okay, we would rather you report something that's not an abuse, and we determine that, as opposed to seeing an abuse and not reporting it. And again, that number that I just talked about, 1-888-NO-CHEAT. If you can't remember that, or I know you guys will probably publish it when you report this story, but you can just call the Attorney General's office. Just go online and type South Carolina Attorney General's Contact Us button. Call the office. Call your local law enforcement. Say, hey, can you get me through to the Attorney General? You can find us. Just call the front line. We will get you to these folks and get you where you need to go.
Do you have any numbers to estimate perhaps the number of cases that are going unreported?
That's like an unknown, right? I mean, we don't know what we don't know. And so, this morning when we were huddling right before we came down here, every year I have them brief me, and of course they brief me with charts on our Medicaid, provider fraud, and our vulnerable adult cases. And I said, I could just shoot you guys hundreds of numbers, and we have state fiscal calendar years, and we have federal fiscal calendar years, and then we have the regular calendar year, and then we have cases open, cases closed, number of convictions, things like that. And I said, let's not drown them in numbers. So I said, just go back for 5 years, give me the average number of referrals, give me the average number of referrals and the average number of cases that we open. I can tell you this, with the exception, I think, of a dismissal, our conviction rate, once a case is open, is 100%. So I can tell you that. Anything else that you think we should highlight? Or anyone else?
I would just add that a part of our grant, since you asked about that, we were originally created as the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. The Medicaid program was created, and OIG realized that they needed some kind of mechanism in place to basically be a watchdog for Medicaid funds. So we grew out of that, and then we kind of folded in this patient abuse jurisdiction or vulnerable adult jurisdiction, and that's on a nationwide level. Because typically the people who are defrauding the Medicaid program, at the time when this was developed, they were sometimes committing patient abuse cases also. So that's how those two fold together. So we do work both Medicaid provider fraud and vulnerable adult cases. And typically in the past, the recoveries we've received for against individuals defrauding the Medicaid program have contributed significantly to our unit's budget and operations.
All right. Any other questions? If you want to talk to any of our team as we walk out, feel free. I'm happy to talk to you as well, but you've seen enough of me. But we'll make ourselves available before we leave the room. But again, I want to thank our friends in the media for telling this story. Again, you're kind of, whether you realize it or not, you're a team member because you're helping us amplify our message and our story so that we can get it out to the public that this is happening, that this type of abuse is real and it's prevalent, but the resources to combat it and prevent it are also real and prevalent. And you can see up here, we got a small army, and we're coming for those guys and gals that are abusing vulnerable adults in South Carolina. So thank you so much. Appreciate you being here today. This really does conclude the press conference.